I'm Sherry Buchanan. I'm your service leader this morning. My pronouns are she, her. Let us acknowledge that we walk upon the traditional territories of the Niukanska people, known sometimes by the name Osage, the original nations of this land, who continue to cry out for justice and self-determination. As we settle into this time of meaning making together, we invite you to notice where you are. Feel yourself grounded in this space. Release the tension from your body and take a deep cleansing breath. We'll light our chalice with the words of Beth Swinnicke. May this flame, symbol of transformation since time began, fire our curiosity, strengthen our wills, and sustain our courage as we seek what is good within and around us. This year, Ramadan begins at sundown today, so I'd like to share the words of Summer El-Bayete, a UU Muslim of Iraqi descent. Since the Prophet Muhammad first received a revelation of the Quran in the cave of Hira, Ramadan is a celebration of this fact. I tried to embrace my spiritual crisis as an entrance to a cave that the divine had opened up for me. All I needed to do was enter, to seek refuge, and this I did. It's always a challenge to feel a sense of the holy when I go through difficulties, but it's at that exact time that I need to find more time for prayer, study, and meditation. When the holy month of Ramadan approaches, it becomes a beautiful reminder to return to myself and remember who I truly am and what the divine is calling me to become. Ramadan is a time of going deeper into a spiritual oasis, like entering a cave for a few hours while I fast from bodily nourishment. It's an invitation to pause for a whole month while I find spiritual awakening by studying the Quran more deeply and performing embodiment prayers 5 times a day. It becomes a holy retreat from the mundane, even in the midst of the ordinary. For 30 days, I fulfill my spiritual needs as if in great hunger for the divine spirit, and hopefully I emerge from the cave transformed. This holy experience is the healing. This sacred time is an abundant act of love. And this is what I seek each year during this most blessed of months, so I can answer the call of the divine spirit.
Good morning, everybody. I lost my twin, so if he reappears, he's just going to sit in the front row, so don't worry. Is that better? Okay, my name is Anna. I get to share the message with you today. I'm a white woman, blondish hair, brown eyes, nice like silver streaks framing my face. I'm wearing a blue shirt, beige sweater, and jeans today because of the Missouri weather. This is a heavy reading, so I invite you to just kind of settle in. As I read it, I really tried to listen for the message. The author gives us 2 lessons at the end, so see if you can pull those out. Okay, am I close enough? Can you hear? Okay, all right. Let's see. I'm going to start with a reading from A River Runs Through It by Norman MacLean. Now, nearly all those I loved and did not understand when I was young are gone, but I still reach out to them. Of course, now I'm too old to be much of a fisherman, and now, of course, I usually fish the big waters alone, although some friends think I shouldn't. Like many fly fishermen in western Montana, where the summer days are almost Arctic in length, I often do not start fishing until the cool of the evening. Then, in the Arctic half light of the canyon, all existence fades to a being with my soul and memories and the sounds of the big Blackfoot River and a 4-count rhythm and the hope that a fish will rise. Eventually, all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. The river was cut by the world's great flood and runs over rocks from the basement of time, and some of the rocks are timeless raindrops. Beneath the rocks are the words, and some of the words are theirs. I am haunted by waters. Now for the sermon. Take a deep breath. I'm going to try not to cry as I read it. What is the spark that ignites change, that creates more creativity, safety, beauty, collaboration, and compassion in the world? And what is that spark made of? Is some of it God? I would say yes. Is some of it the beautiful machine that is the human brain? Certainly. Some part desperation too, and some part the protective instinct and a sense of duty and responsibility. Maybe it's largely a desire to improve and save, not just oneself and not just one's kin, but the human race and this precious world. That is ours to dwell within so briefly. 74 years ago, tragedy befell a lovely spot of Montana near Helena called Mann Gulch beside the Missouri River. On August 5th, 1949, lightning hit a dead tree. Those were the early years of smoke jumpers, teams of men sent by the Forest Service to stop small forest fires before they blazed out of control. They would parachute out of a small plane to reach otherwise inaccessible areas. They did this to save lives and property and valuable timber, and they did it for the sense of adventure. They were very young, usually unmarried, sometimes had done military service, and often rather overly impressed with themselves. Everyone thought the Mann Gulch Fire would be busted in time for them to be home by 10 o'clock the next morning. 15 men jumped that day, and they were also met at the site by a forest ranger, Jim Harrison, who had already been fighting the fire for 4 hours. Of those 16 men, only 3 survived. One of those 3 was the foreman, Wagner, called Wag for short, Dodge. What Wag Dodge thought and what he did in order to survive heartens me in the most discouraged times and gives me hope for human beings, one and all. Mann Gulch is shaped like a funnel. The south side of it is heavy timber that burns hot. The north side is grassier, an extremely steep grade up a rocky ledge. Wag Dodge and his team had the Missouri River at their backs, the south side, which was burning, on their left, and the north side, which was cool, on their right. They should have been able to fight the fire, and they should have had the river as an escape route. But the fire suddenly crowned. It blew up stronger and hotter, and it jumped from the south side to the north side of the gulch, and it cut the team off from the river. Wag Dodge ordered the team to drop their equipment and run up the hill, and they began to do so. But then he saw that the fire was coming up the hill toward them much too fast. And suddenly he saw, in a moment of brilliant insight, simultaneously as he pulled a book of matches out of his pocket, he saw what he had to do. He lit in front of himself and his team above the approaching main fire, a patch of waist-high grass. He knew the grass would burn down quickly. Then he turned and called to his men, "Step into this circle I've lit. It's the only thing that will save us." But either they did not hear him with the roar of the approaching fire, or they could not make sense of what he asked. It felt too counterintuitive to them, as it would most. They ran faster than they ever imagined they could run up the hill to the ridge. So Wag Dodge stepped into the oasis he had made. He later called it his escape fire, and he lay down, face down in the ash. He hoped there would be oxygen a few inches from the ground, and there was. The main fire reached him, and finding no fuel, it parted around where he lay and raced up the hill, and Wag Dodge's life was saved. Only 2 other men survived the fire, Walter Rumsey and Bob Sally. They made it to the ridge and found a crevice to crawl through to the other side. Walter Rumsey died in 1980 at the age of 52 in a small plane crash. Bob Sally lived to be 82 years old. Mr. Rumsey said that untold thousands of acres were saved because smoke jumpers got to fires before they got out of control. And Mr. Sally was still giving presentations to firefighters about the Mann Gulch Fire and fire safety up into a few years before his death. Mr. Sally also talked extensively with Norman McLean, the author of A River Runs Through It. Mr. McLean wrote the book Young Men and Fire about the Mann Gulch Fire. As I have looked at that tragedy from so many different angles, I've wondered what motivated the smoke jumpers to undertake such dangerous work. Mr. Sally jumped for 2 other fires that he survived after he survived Mann Gulch. These words of Norman McLean from his book are one answer to my question. It is very important to a lot of people to make unmistakably clear to themselves and to the universe that they love the universe but are not intimidated by it and will not be shaken by it, no matter what it has in store. Moreover, they demand something from themselves early in life that can be taken ever after as a demonstration of this abiding feeling. When people retell the story of the Mann Gulch Fire, they say there were 15 smoke jumpers and 1 forest ranger, and that of those 16, only 3 men survived. But there was actually a 4th member of the team who also survived, a smoke jumper who became extremely ill on the plane from the turbulence and went back to the base instead of jumping that day. His name was Merle Stratton, and I honor him equally. Before I looked him up in his life, I wondered if he, racked by the survivor's guilt as he likely was, then lived an unproductive or even self-destructive life, pained by confusion and grief. To my glad surprise, he did not so waste away. He lived in Chehalis, Washington for 44 years, was an active member of the Methodist Church there, and an avid hunter, fisherman, gardener, and loved woodworking. He was married for 62 years and had several grandchildren, great-grandchildren, nieces, and nephews, and he earned a bachelor's of science in forestry and worked for the Department of Natural Resources for 32 years. If that is an unadventurous life, it is a dignified and loving life, centered on family and community. The smoke jumper stories deserve retelling, all of them. As Norman McLean remarked, one of the finest things men and women do is rescue men and women, even when they know they are rescuing the dead. The smoke jumper stories are worth retelling, and I wonder at Wag Dodge's moment of insight when he saw that the solution lay in lighting an escape fire, and then he created that. When asked about that moment, he later said, "I don't know why I thought it. I just thought it. It suddenly seemed logical to him." We know that the Plains Indians also would create escape fires that would protect them from oncoming large fire. Some of the early pioneers learned this strategy from the Indians. Hiram N. Chinton wrote of this in his volume, The American Fur Trade of the Far West, and novelist James Fenimore Cooper described such an escape fire in his novel, The Prairie, in 1827. But Wag Dodge had never read nor been told of such an almost miraculous feat. How did he do that new thing? There was desperation, surely, and the fact that he kept his cool and the duty responsibility, and protectiveness he felt for his team. And a beautiful mind, scientist Carl Weck in his article in Administrative Science Quarterly on the Mann Gulch Fire lifts up 2 lessons learned. So I'm going to pause before I give you the lessons. Anybody want to throw out a lesson? That was a long story. No?
Persevere.
Persevere. Anything else? Nothing? Okay, this is what the author says. Lesson number 1, improvisation and bricolage. Bricolage is something constructed or created from a diverse range of available things, Wick writes. Creativity is figuring out how to use what we already know in order to go beyond what you currently think. Dodge was able to improvise a way to survive the fire because he was what we now would call a bricoler, someone able to create order out of whatever materials were at hand. Lesson number 2, the attitude of wisdom. To be wise is not to know particular facts, but to know without excessive confidence or excessive cautiousness. Wisdom is an attitude taken by persons toward the beliefs, values, knowledge, information, abilities, and skills that are held. A tendency to doubt that these are necessarily true or valid, and to doubt that they are an exhaustive set of those things that could be known. In a fluid world, wise people know that they don't fully understand what is happening right now because they have never seen precisely this event before. Almost there. The Mann Gulch Fire Memorial plaque reads, on August 5th, 1949, a lightning-caused wildfire entrapped a smoke jumper crew in this steep canyon. Before it was controlled, it took the lives of 13 men and burned nearly 5,000 acres. The lessons learned from this tragic event continue to influence wildland firefighting. We cannot ever say that the lasting good that the results from such a tragedy made the lives lost worthwhile. That's the thing about tragedy. It cannot be viewed as a math problem, and the parts of it never come out even. But tragedy, adversity, suffering, and hardship can lead to brilliant achievements, beauties, discoveries, and successes by individuals and in ways that move all of humanity in great leaps forward. So says Malcolm Gladwell in his book, David and Goliath, Underdogs, Misfits, and the Art of Battling Giants. Gladwell writes that though obstacles, disabilities, and loss of loved ones are never inherently a good thing, of course they are not. Struggling through them and triumphing over them can result in breakthroughs in all arenas, from arts, entertainment, and sports to cancer research and peace between warring nations. The late Forrest Church, Unitarian Universalist minister and author, agreed. In his book, Lifelines, Holding On and Letting Go, he wrote, adversity doesn't always bring out the best in people, but it can. That is because adversity, not always but sometimes, tends to strip away our illusions. It forces us to work within tightly drawn and well-defined limits. And when we do, everything within those limits is heightened. Little things take on much higher degree of importance. We count as blessings, things that other times we simply take for granted. The lessons learned from the Mann Gulch Fire have continued to improve and save lives into the present day and all over the world. People have dedicated years of their lives to researching and sharing the ways that tragedy shows us better ways to fight and control fires, to build teams that communicate, collaborate, and take emergency action, and to always ensure escape routes. The Forest Service's priorities changed. They learned that if a fire cannot be controlled without losing lives, then the safety of the team is more important than fighting that fire. And I am moved to mention also that the Forest Service has learned better how to honor a firefighter who died in the line of duty. Initially, 13 crosses were erected to mark the locations where the Mann Gulch firefighters died. but one of them was David Navin, who was Jewish. In 2001, the cross marking the place where Mr. Navin died was replaced with a marker bearing a Star of David. And so I think the lasting good from the tragedy of Mann Gulch is something cumulative. Looking back on it, we can now see the immeasurable creativity, new ideas, and advancement that were possible, and the opportunities that have been grasped. We can learn from past mistakes and ignorance. We can be more protective of one another in this beautiful land. And we can create oases of compassionate care. We can make and share sanctuaries. The opportunities to spark all those precious new things await us in the coming year and on this new day. As Norman MacLean wrote, as I get considerably beyond the biblical allotment of 70 years and 10, I feel with increasing intensity that I can express my gratitude for still being around on the oxygen side of Earth's crust, only not by standing pat on what I have hitherto known and loved. While oxygen lasts, there are still new things to love, especially if compassion is a form of love. Let us take heart in the promise of a fresh and new way. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. What a dramatic and powerful message about transformation.